So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the continuance of case number ZON18-0016. We are calling this meeting to order. Attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Before we go any further, I'd like to ask Mary Shaw to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, polling for any potential conflicts of interest? Hearing none, okay. As some of you, in fact most of you, if not all of you, have probably heard, we have some changed circumstances that we're going to be addressing. Before I go any further, there will be order. I know this is highly contentious, but there's going to be order, and I will insist on it. Before I go any further, however, I'm going to ask Director David Callahan to comment and bring us up to speed, if you will, as to the latest developments. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. It falls to me to apologize and say we, the staff, are sorry that we have been processing a case improperly, this one that's before you. That is known that within the last few business days, it turns out, because the applicant had gone through our records and discovered that there was a 30-year-old rezoning. As soon as I figure out why this is not working for me, would you just advance it one for me? There. That's the ordinance that was done 30 years ago. It was actually the second of two ordinances. The first approval by the then board was not absolutely clear as to what was being rezoned. This final ordinance made it unambiguous and clearly stated that it was all going from restricted residential to commercial. If you'll advance to the next slide. This is a digital image of our then hand-drawn maps from about 90-something, shortly after that 1990 ordinance. And if you look where the arrow points, that's about where the spigot of land is. It's above the ordinary high water mark. And all of that lighter reddish area on top of, you can see the yellow underneath, is where the staff hand drew using a marker. It's drawn in, going from yellow to red. So you know that the staff took the time and even hand wrote the case file on there. If you look closely, you can see Z-581-89. That's the case file for that ordinance you just saw on the screen. So it's unambiguous that the zoning was changed, that the zoning map was changed. Then if, Mary, you'll please advance to the next one. By 95, we see our first digital representations on the left side of the screen. It's marked as a 95 AutoCAD digital representation because in 95, AutoCAD was the state of the art for drafting and drawing these kinds of things. And our then building and planning staff, we were called, transitioned from hand-drawn maps to digital maps. And AutoCAD, using state-of-the-art technology, they drew in as best they could following what the ordinance said. But you can see in 97 on the right side of the screen where the county transitioned from AutoCAD to is our current filing system that's under the ISRI umbrella, which is a GIS shapefile. That's a completely different programming. And so it's entirely possible that things could be lost literally going from AutoCAD to GIS, but because of the two different programs. But also you can see it looks very clear that the staff took the time in 97. I don't know why we're having a problem here. If it'll hold long enough, you can see that the yellow followed the road line on this map. Here it goes out to the ordinary high water mark, is my presumption. And that's when the error presumably first occurred in getting this spit of land that was the main subject before you out from underneath the the mapping of the commercial zoning to the, and showed it for the first time, presumably, since the 1990 order, as restricted residential. And that's presumably how we've carried forward all of the last 23 years, the restricted residential on this property. I can explain it no better than that. It was a staff error, presumably in 97. That, of course, predates all of my staff and myself. Not something we can control, but it's also the sort of thing that's immensely frustrating for us, and I assume people in the audience, that we've processed something for no useful purpose. We've wasted lots of people's time. I am sorry for that. We have taken measures today that this won't happen again. One of them is that one of my hotshot GIS planners is going to go through all of our shape files and all of our old hand-drawn maps and compare the two and make sure that they're actually accurate. The people such as Vlad who process these cases are going to start with the original zoning when we get a new request for a rezoning and bring it forward all the way to today's current zoning and look for all the ordinances that there are so that this sort of thing, again, can't happen again. But we have what we have. I'm sorry I can't unchisel this stone. My suggestion is that you take Q&A today because people will obviously want to have answers, and I'll be glad to try and help with that. But that we take no further testimony, because in my view, this case is no longer properly before you. And because we have the weirdness of continuing this to 6 o'clock, my suggestion is you don't close the hearing today. We allow it to go to 6, and we'll have a repeat discussion at 6. And then once you've accepted the applicant's withdrawal, which I understand is forthcoming, then you would announce that you're not taking any more testimony and you're closing out the public hearing, closing the case, and not taking action on it because it would be improper to do so. I can't think of anything else at the moment. Do you have any questions for me?
I think you've covered it well. Questions? Leslie, Bill?
No.
None for David? So you're okay with the director's recommendations as to how we proceed?
Thank you.
Thank you, David. At this time, I'll ask Rand Wickman, consultant for the Condons, to come forward. Rand?
Thank you, Commissioners. Rand Wickman, for the record, as you said, representing the Condons. And we also feel badly that we find ourselves in this situation having gone through all of the effort we did. But nonetheless, we, with the direction that Director Callahan has provided, we're in concurrence. We think that's appropriate procedure, and so we would offer to withdraw our request and understand that won't really take effect until tonight, and so we'll be back tonight. We'll make the same announcement tonight, but we do hereby formally request a withdrawal of the application.
Thank you. Any questions for Rand Wickman?
No.
None? Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Rand.
Commissioners.
So what we'll do at this point is we're not going to take any further public testimony as Director Callahan has recommended. However, we will open it up for questions and answers. I do request that your questions be respectful. I will not entertain accusations. Things happen, errors occur. This particular error occurred because we underwent a transition from manual to automation. So if anybody would like to come forward and pose a question, we will attempt to answer it, whether it be Director Callahan or one of us. Feel free. Yes, sir. Please give your name and address.
My name is Doug Fagerness, and I live at 2317 West Aviera Place in Riverstone. My question is that we know we have contention here, and I also know that we all love our lake. So my question is how do we come together to conserve, protect, and restore with unanimity, with respect for each other, with hearing each other? So that's a simple question. I know it might be a complex answer, but I felt compelled to ask it. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Anybody want to take a stab at that? You're right, it is complex. I'll have to ponder it for a moment. Jackie, come forward.
Jackie McNamara, 5223 South Catamount, Harrison, Idaho. I have been through the hearing examiner and the first hearing where people were turned away from these hearings because the size of the room was too small, where the hearing place was misled to be the library, where people were not given their accurate time to speak. And again, our planning director would have been in charge of all this, and now our planning director would have been in charge of accurately stating the zoning for this piece of property. I am frustrated, like everyone else in this room, with the incompetence of the planning and zoning department, and I think the responsibility does fall on those who are in charge. I have lost all credibility with the planning and zoning department, as have the people who have shown up for this and followed every ordinance to the T. So this demands a change in that zoning department. This cannot continue. This isn't a
So
single
what, Jackie, please, what's your question?
My question is, will anyone be held accountable and will changes be made? Because the planning department has lost its credibility.
I can give you a simple answer. I'll speak for myself. No. Mistakes happen. There was a transition from manual to automation. I've been through this in other venues in the past. I think they've acted admirably in trying to correct it. And the errors that you point out of the mishaps in procedure are almost irrelevant at this point. We were going to make adjustments to the time allotment pursuant to the Idaho code, or excuse me, our own development code, but that's all irrelevant at this point. The fact is, there was a decision made, there was an order of decision that was issued back in the 90s, and we have to respect it. It has the rule of law. That's where we're at this point.
I'm not questioning that decision. I'm questioning the fact that the Planning and Zoning Department did not discover it, but fortunately someone else did. Did they know that they should research further than the Planning and Zoning Department? That is the big issue here. There's no credibility left with the Planning and Zoning Department.
Does anybody wish to respond? Leslie, Bill?
Well, I would disagree. I think this is a human error perpetrated by humans who are not around right now. The people who did this and switched it from commercial to residential no longer are employed by the county, whether it's in the planning department or on the Board of Commissioners. And things like this happen, especially when we're converting over from old technology to new technology.
Well, I respect Rand Wickman for researching it further instead of the planning department, because he's the one who discovered the error, whereas it should have been our planning department. That's why the credibility is lost. That's why we were here for so many meetings. That's why we continue to show up today. And I think that someone in that department has to be held accountable. And that's how a lot of people feel. Thank you.
I do have a response to the first gentleman and the second lady. Grace is one way that we get along, and that we don't assume motives, and that we can work together and talk to each other and maintain relationship instead of letting our differences divide us. And then as far as the planning department is concerned, I have been a personal victim of travesty in the past from not who's here now, but in the past leadership. Since Director Callahan has taken over, I have seen nothing but improvement. So mistakes are made, and he finds mistakes, I don't know, weekly, monthly, mistakes from the past, and he has done everything he can to make them right, to the point where not having the applicant suffer. So mistakes in the past, he does his very best to correct it, to do what's right. And I appreciate our department. Mistakes will happen, but I stand behind them.
Great.
Thank you. David, did you wish to say something?
I would just piggyback on Commissioner Duncan's thought that what brings us together is the ability to listen without judgment. That takes time, it takes courage, but I believe it is within each of us.
Amy, go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm presenting on behalf of Kootenai Environmental Alliance. And, this is a lot of new information that's been submitted to the public. And we have concerns or questions on how we would formally submit concerns to the county. I think one of our biggest questions is that this whole application was reined in some degree with the conditional zoning development agreement. And we wonder, because it is zoned commercial, does that open this property up for all uses by right that are allowed in the commercial zone?
No, why would that be the case?
Because it's zoned commercial?
You want to respond to that?
Mr. Chairman, it actually is the case.
Go ahead.
Since the zoning allows all commercial uses, I think what is helpful in this case is in this particular case, the use proposed triggers a special notice.
Precisely.
And a special notice, you might not know, is what I would call a baby conditional use permit. A conditional use permit goes through a public hearing process. The special notice does not, it's purely administrative. But it nonetheless gives me the ability as director to require things like ride in and ride out, certain limits to total number of trips, lighting, noise, trash receptacles, so on and so forth. And it also, just to finish the thought, and then I'll
No, it's
any other question you have. The beauty of the conditional, or in this case, special notice, is that it's appealable. If people don't like my decision, if Mr. Condon doesn't like my decision, it can end up here in the same format.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess that's our main question is, what is the process by which we would submit any concerns to the county on this whole process and the issue that's been presented today?
Just write us directly.
Okay.
kcbocc@kcgov.us. Yep.
And also, we would kind of want to raise the question that if this is just one of potentially several parcels that have been miszoned because of the software changeover, and it would be nice to have more clarity on this, all the properties that have been miszoned, and all that information related to the public as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else wish, Tom?
Tom Torgerson, 4808 Fernand Hill Road. I'm going to try to figure out how to make this a question.
Don't struggle.
And this isn't really about John or Gayla Condon. I would wager to say that David Callahan and I probably don't agree on a lot of things. But I will tell you this, and this is simply in his defense. I fought for 5 years with his predecessor to try to get something resolved very close to Commissioner Filios's home that could never get done because of obstructionism. And while he may not have agreed to help, he got on it. We had meetings with the city of Coeur d'Alene because it was an adjacent city and county property. And David busted hump, and we got it resolved finally. And so things like this do happen. I've had it, I think like Commissioner Duncan said, I've had it happen to me, where deeds get missed, recordings get missed, happens with title companies, deeds of reconveyance get missed, and you find out about it. But I want to attest to Callahan's credibility. And I just think it's just absolutely wrong to hold somebody accountable for something that happened 30 years ago. So, and this has nothing to do with the application, just about David, so.
Okay, thank you. No, he made us.
You agree, there's a question.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
I'm going to comment on a couple of the points that were made earlier. First, on the question of how do we work together. And what I really want to say is this. We have initiated a process, actually I was the one that proposed it, where we have a number of advisory boards, and the one that you would be most concerned with today is the Planning Commission. And I initiated an effort, and my co-commissioners agreed that everybody sitting on a commission would reapply, and we would take new applications as well. And I can tell you that the folks that I have examined the applications for the Planning Commission, what I look for is balance. I have no tolerance for extremes. I look for balance. I look for people who can look at both sides of the issue, and to the question of how we come together, that's how we do it. That's how this nation was built. There was a lot of contention during the Constitutional Convention, but compromises had to be made, or we wouldn't have built what we've created today. So we're going to try to do the same thing with not just the Planning Commission, but essentially all our advisory boards. Bill, Leslie, would you care to?
No?
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Gina Brooks, 6597 East Pine Road, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. First of all, thank you for what you just said, and also what Doug Fagerness said. I totally agree. How do we work together? I do have a question. If this application goes through, it was said in the previous hearings that there wouldn't be work done during the winter when the eagles are here, because the water level would be too low. Is there a way that we, as citizens, or can make that part of an application like a requirement?
I think it goes back to the special notice permit. David, you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, sir. Through the special notice, we'll address issues such as that. And then again, if the public or Mr. Condon don't agree with our conditions of approval, that can be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Dave White. I've got a place on the east side of the lake, and I'll compliment you guys if you can resolve these problems. I'm
Try.
about as native as you come. I know a few of the people back here, born, raised here. Born, raised here.
Thank you.
I'm a builder. I grew up here with nothing. I used to build all around the lake. I quit building around the lake because of the politics. The hardest, I mean, I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate the whole community, the whole county. Education is huge. There's a few of us in this room that know quite a bit about, I'm not an old guy, I'm not a young guy, but I know a lot about the lake. And I knew that was commercial years ago. I didn't have to look at a map. I haven't been to many of your meetings. I come here and I found out you're wondering if it's commercial or residential. I've known it's been commercial all my life. Being born, it used to be a restaurant out there, pilings out there. How many people's looked at the map? That's always been land, you know? I didn't have to know that. But why does the applicant have to go through everything he went through? You know, I know him, but I don't know him. But he shouldn't have to go through that. And the people that are coming here, are moving here, we would love to have them in our community. But they shouldn't have to argue and fight for somebody. We need him out there. If we are building houses on this lake, and we have
Yeah, you're getting into a realm of
I
public
understand.
testimony. Do you have a
the
question?
question is,
Yes, go right ahead.
can your staff work to make all applicants better in streamlining before problems come?
Go ahead. Leslie?
Well, I believe that they are doing that, and he has been doing that. So if you take this one instance, I mean, how many hundreds of applications do you process a year? So,
Don't have that number at my fingertips, but total number of permits and applications is in the thousands.
right, so to have one, major thing out of thousands, I think it's just going to happen. But you heard going forward that staff is going to be looking at the maps and making sure that in the new GIS system that they do match.
And really, to your question, it's funny because David and I had this conversation before we began the meeting. And I think sometimes where his folks are criticized, and unfairly so, that is to say the employees within the planning department, is that they try to work with an applicant to take that applicant to an approval. But David reminded me that there are cases where they know right up front it is simply not going to fly. And they level with the applicant at that point in time. And so they do their best to make the process as efficient as possible so that everybody is well served.
Okay. I just know over the years, I quit building on the lake because of problems. And here we are, 20 years later with the same problems, is what I would like to bring it to your attention.
Well, thank you for sharing.
And you guys just, I've seen it after commissioner after commissioner. You guys aren't in here long enough to resolve the problem before you guys are replaced. And you need to be, you need to be here for 6 years, and you get voted out because you can't your staff can't fix the problem if they're taught the wrong situation right from the beginning. I know because I've lived here all my life and I've seen commissioner after commissioner. I've seen staff after staff. I've seen problem after problem. And you
Okay,
can
fair
say
enough.
it, but
Okay, we got to make room for some others. Thank
Okay,
you.
so I'm just letting you
Yeah,
know,
I-
I've been pushed away before too, but we still have the same problem 25 years later.
Well, progress is sometimes slow, but we're making progress nevertheless.
Okay. Will I
Thank
ever
you.
be able to build on Lake Coeur d'Alene again?
That's your decision.
Well, let's get rid of the problems, and I will.
Okay, we're working on them. Next, please. Anybody else?
Chris, I'm sorry. Before, the problem is that we're always going to have human beings here. Now, in the short year that I've been here, David Callahan has been the most even-handed. I mean, he has no dog in any fight. And he tries to help applicants understand what the process is and what the ordinances are and how they should proceed, and, you know, without any kind of thumb on the scale. And I appreciate that. And I know that he insists on that with his staff. And in the odd circumstance where somebody felt like they were not being dealt with fairly, David is the first one to look into it. So I appreciate what you're doing. That's all.
Sir, name and address, go right ahead.
My name is Paul Bowl, and I'm at 1107 East Echo Bay Drive, Harrison, Idaho. Two questions. One is commercial versus industrial. This picture was the part where they were dredging that area, and this looks industrial. I'll present this to you.
Go right ahead.
And my second question is, when the road gets destroyed by the trucks, who's going to fix it? The state? Because we've been waiting for years and years and years, and they still haven't done it yet.
Do you want me to answer you?
Sure.
The road jurisdiction is the Idaho Department of Transportation, so your question is probably better directed at them.
Okay.
And commercial versus industrial at the present, you know, it's kind of interesting, David and I had this conversation because I had the same concern that you just raised. Is this commercial or is this really more industrial? When you get into the definition of industrial, now you're implying manufacturing and other considerations. I think your question is valid, but for the moment, this is commercial.
Happy New Year to you,
Thank
by the
you,
way.
though, appreciate it. Anyone else? Janet?
Janet Torline, 1802 East Lytton Lane, Harrison, Idaho. I'd like to know how to get a hold of a complete copy of the public record, including the minutes and Planning and Zoning Commission and the County Commission on this prior zoning action. I would like to have access to those. I would also like to know how I get access to those. I guess those are my
Okay,
questions.
I'll answer you. So you're referring to the decision, the record?
In 1990.
The decision that was made in the 90s. Okay, so what would happen is phrase your question as you just did, formally in a public information request, and then we will go out and research it and provide you with the necessary information.
I have questions regarding the depth of this information and whether it's verifiable going forward. So thank you. I
Yeah,
pursue
it's a public
that.
information request,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. Yes, sir. Name and address. Take your time, it's okay.
It's Bill Green, 2803 North 5th in Coeur d'Alene, and also 8275 Bridger Trail Road on Beauty Bay. And I have a question. I don't think it's off the topic, but it might be. If you could put that map back up there that had there was a little difference between one of the pictures and the other picture. There was like a red border between the boundary line? Can you? Okay. I was just wondering if that referred to high water or what the difference was between those two pictures in terms of the boundary. The other picture's a lot better.
We're doing selfies now.
That's right.
By the way, we did manage to raise the screen, or raise the projector so that there would be greater visibility. So we did hear you.
The image is a little higher.
Yeah, the image is higher.
A blank screen has many images.
That's right. There we go.
So you want to rephrase your question while we're waiting?
I'm just wondering whether or not, if there is a difference in those lines in terms of the water level, if it was referring to that or not, if that has anything to do with zoning and use and all those questions that's floating around in the
David,
background.
you want to
While the image is
Go right
coming
ahead.
up, I think I can help with that. If you remember that slide on the left and the slide on the right, the ordinary high water mark was not shown on the slide on the right, or excuse me, it was shown on the slide on the right. It was not shown on the left because the zoning line on the left followed the road.
Okay.
So the zoning map did show a change in zoning, and that presumably is where the error is, because the 1990 action by the then Board of County Commissioners rezoned all of Mr. Condon's property to commercial. It was a mapping error.
So the high water mark or level has nothing to do with any of that then?
It has everything to do with it because it showed the zoning line following it. On this, I wish we could get that one back up on the right side. The yellow line changed from the road. Oh, there we go. So just move on to that fourth slide, number 4.
Yeah, just bring the cursor down. There you go.
Yeah, maximize, or push F4. There you go.
Okay, fine.
Well, if you look on the left here, you see how the red goes all the way to the road. Over here, you see how it follows what can only, in my mind, be the ordinary high water mark. The reason I know that.
He didn't touch it.
I didn't touch it either, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. There's
David,
privilege
yellow
in
is
here.
residential, is that correct?
Yes,
And red is commercial?
commercial.
Okay.
And to me, the only logical reading of this is it follows the ordinary high water mark because this spit of land, I've gotten my memory from Vlad's countless presentations now, is the main subject of this issue. And that, you probably can't see it from the back, but right in here, the aerial photo shows is the same area. Mary, if you'd advanced a couple of slides if you can, to the ones that where Vlad had put together that shows the actual, there. This is the part I'm talking about, and then go one more slide, or two, and then the next one. Here. So the ordinary high water mark is this blue line, and it runs, or excuse me, in any event, this is the area that we were trying to show earlier. It's been captured by moving the restricted residential line from the road to the ordinary high water mark.
And tell me again, the ordinary high water mark means something in terms of available for use.
Well, there's the difference in jurisdiction is the main thing. IDL, Idaho Department of Lands, has all of the control below the ordinary high water mark. We, the county, have control above that. So in this case, we have control. Out here, we don't.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
You might as well leave it up. Thanks, Bill. Any other questions? Bev? Do you want to come on up and just stand right behind Bev so that when she's finished, we can take your question?
Bev Twillman, 15143 South Asbury Lane, Harrison, Idaho. I came in late, I apologize for that, so I may be redundant in what I'm asking. But am I understanding that there's not going to be any further hearings on whether this particular project can take place? It's just automatic, it is allowable, so it's going in? Or is there a pathway for the citizens to take that feel that since times have changed since 1990, we don't feel at this time, with all the growth and the activity and the condition of the highway and the ignoring of the highway by ITD, that this would be safe, beneficial, or whatever. But the point is there an avenue to take in decisions that maybe, I know back zoning, or whatever you would call it, wouldn't happen, but just to say, no, this doesn't fit now because we have too many people, too much traffic, and the highway can't handle it? Is there ever a avenue for that?
Answer that if you'd like.
Go ahead, David.
The county can initiate zoning, but it would be unusual for any county commissioners to rezone property against the owner's desires.
Okay, so is there something besides, I mean, all commercial property isn't equal, correct?
Well, before we go there, maybe the answer to your question is best to remember that the special notice permit still has
That's where I was going to go.
be applied. We still have to review it. We still have to make a decision. You, anyone else from the public, or Mr. Condon can ask to appeal my decision.
And
For the special
is that
notice
when we appeal it, is that when it goes into the public hearing stage?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I guess that answers.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Alma Volk, 3209 North 8th Street, Coeur d'Alene. Just a question of when your special notice or whatever goes out, will there be environmental concerns such as the dredging, bringing up toxins from the bottom of the lake and all that type of stuff, and the spawning of kokanee, which the picture in the last hearing showed with that one guy who was the rower, and as he ran out of time, he showed kokanee spawning right in that area.
Those concerns are addressed by the Idaho Department of Lands through their review process, not the county.
Okay, will you be reviewing that in your permit?
No, that's the Idaho Department of Lands.
Will they have a say in what happens?
They have a say on their review of their permit,
Okay, they will review the permit.
their permit, which is separate from our special notice permit.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one point?
Yeah, please.
Pat Braden, Civil Deputy Prosecutor. Just also, I just wanted to point out that the special notice permit process does, even though there's no public hearing before the commissioners, there is a public comment period. And so that would be the first opportunity for the public to comment on that permit application. And of course, then there is the appeal process for whomever, is maybe an affected person, person affected by the decision.
Okay. Go ahead.
Isaiah Harrison, 11134 East Wolf Lodge Bay Road, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Thank you all for taking questions tonight. That's something that was unexpected largely. So we all speak of, I do have a question at the end of this. We all speak of cooperation and working together. And yeah, there's a lot that we agree on. So we all agree Mr. Condon's service is necessary, and we all agree that it's something that has to occur on the lake. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who don't believe this is the right area. There's people from both sides of the argument. It's not exactly a partisanship. So the question is, with Mr. Condon already operating on the lake, out of the south end of the lake, why can the city not invest its time and resources into finding him a better place so that everyone at the end of the day is satisfied? Why is that something that's impossible at this point?
Have you asked the city? So we have no jurisdiction over the city, but that'd be a good question for them.
In that case, is there anything we can do or you can do as the county commissioners, instead of pushing it off to the state level?
Well, we're not pushing it off to the state level. We have, the Condons have come forward, they own a piece of land, and they want to build, their operation on that piece of land, and that's what we're to act on. We're not in a situation where we can be offering alternatives. The question before us is this suitable? Does it meet the zoning parameters and the other considerations? And that's what we have to act upon. That's not to say that there isn't another location, but I don't think it's incumbent upon us to be able to go down that road. Pat, did you want to opine on this?
I don't think there's really a legal question there. It's more of
A business
almost
question?
more of an economic development question if you're looking at trying to partner with the city or even, with another property owner somewhere else in the county to do that. The legal question that had been before us was, should this be rezoned to commercial? And as it turned out, it had been rezoned to commercial back in 1990, so there's nothing more for the county commissioners to consider. He has the rights that he has under commercial zoning, subject to our special notice and building permitting processes and the Idaho Department of Land's permitting process with respect to the areas below the ordinary high water mark. I mean, that's basically as far as we as government can go.
That's fine. Bill, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't even think it's proper for county government
It's not.
to be out looking for property for a particular property owner or business owner as an alternative. That's just not our role. We have enough on our plate.
Am I allowed to ask kind of one more question?
Go right ahead.
So for the past 30 years or 20 or so years of this being residential, does that all just completely change at this point? Is that no longer in effect?
Mr. Chairman?
Go right ahead.
Arguably, it has always been commercial since 1990, and the map just hasn't reflected so.
Okay, so it was the map that was mistaken.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dennis.
Honorable Commissioners, I'm Dennis Bergman. I live at 1724 East Coeur d'Alene Avenue and been a resident for the last 18 years. I've spent a lot of time out in Wolf Bay Lodge. I appreciate all the comments and the efforts, and especially David's explanations today. I have total respect for what he does. I have a recommendation and a question. It seems from hearing everyone speak here that a lot of the decision is departmentalized. Either we're passing it off to some other department who has authorization or legal rights on this and that, and we're not a unifying force here. For me, the unifying force for this community is the protection of our home environment for the future generations. And right now, with this kind of development taking place, and I have due respect for the applicant who submitted this request, we're not taking a strategic approach here to the safeguarding of this lake. And we can see and we can hear the results of studies and scientists and everything else, and you can see the development taking place. I'm all for economic development as long as it's not at the cost and expense of the home environment and for future generations. So my question is, would there be any consideration on your part as commissioners or some other entity in this community to pull the community together for either a workshop or a summit where we can first and foremost have some open dialogue as responsible citizens, understand the processes, because I don't even know all the processes that you're involved with on a day-to-day basis, and if I want to become a responsible citizen to help contribute, I need to know what those processes are, and I don't necessarily need to do that research alone. And I think a unifying force like that over the course of a weekend, and bring in the environmentalists, bring in the developers, bring in everyone, we can maybe develop some new ideas in terms of how we're going to work and make these decisions. This decision is one of the most controversial I've seen in my 18 years here. And it's going to open a floodgate of other contested projects that we want to look at. So I'm all with you, I respect you, but I would ask, is it possible for somebody to step forward and take that leadership role? And is there an interest?
Anybody want to?
That's my question.
I imagine there is an interest, but it's not anything the commissioners can take on. It would have to be a grassroots effort coming up and saying, hey, we want to put on this workshop, and then put out the invitations. But it's not really something that the commissioners can put on their
If
plate.
you found a citizens group that would be willing to do that, would you accept an invitation?
It depends on scheduling, it depends on agenda items, but I mean, I'm always open to community involvement.
I think I can answer your question. I'm going to answer it in two parts. One with respect to this particular situation, and some of the questions that have been raised earlier. When I look at agency comments, for example, and I see a comment that says neutral, that annoys me, because that says I have to make the decision. And I can do that. But if someone is not going to stand up, as we're expected to do, and take the hits, I have very little respect for that kind of a response, personally, okay? So I'm being a little forward, if you will, assertive. On the question of a broader citizen participation, that's what we do with the Planning Commission, that's what we do with the comprehensive plan. Their hearings are wide open. Anybody can come forward and state their opinions. I know for a fact, for example, when the 2010 plan was devised, basically we had experts from a wide variety of fields, fish and game, hydrologists. Many of these people were PhDs, and it was assembled. So that process really does already exist. So while you have a 7-member planning commission, all those meetings are open, so people can come forward and testify. So the processes are there. And so take advantage of it while we can.
My last question, if I may.
Go right ahead.
We all admit that there was a mistake that was made, and as the lady before me indicated, it was 20-some-odd years back. And when mistakes are made, you have an opportunity to correct those mistakes. We're not taking any action to that effect today. And we're not in the same situation we were in the late 90s with the development in this community as I see it, because I came in shortly thereafter. So I think we need to take stock in the fact that Coeur d'Alene today is not Coeur d'Alene of 1997. And so we have to make different decisions and weigh different options. And so I just put that to you as a comment.
Well, thank you. Next. Come right ahead.
Hi. I'm Kathleen Earrings, and I live at 4691 South Stack Road, which is on the off of Cougar Gulch Road. And it's a two-part thing. I've lived here since 1980. I've seen a lot of change, like everybody else has that's been here a long time. And one of the things I've always had a hand on is dealing with planning and zoning because of property problems that I had when we bought our piece of property. There were lots of mistakes a long time ago that we've had to correct over the years, and that's why we have a lot of property line disputes because of old surveys and mistakes that other people made. As you mentioned earlier, human error happens, and we have to, all we can do is deal with the problem as it exists and talk to our neighbors and try to find a thing that's equitable for both, in light of sometimes there's no good way except, okay, I'll buy the property, or okay, I'll sell the property, or okay. So what I'm trying to say is, first of all, I had a lot of dealings with different planning and zonings over the years, and I want to thank everybody that on staff in the past as well as the present on doing only the best they can do. That's all we can ask of them. We need to trust that they're trying to do their civic duty. And the commissioners and the staff needs to understand that there's many people that are just trying to do their civic duty too. So we need to just say, what is the problem and how can we fix it so that it will be equitable for everybody? So that was a thank you to all the people and an understanding of where I'm coming from. But the question I have is, I probably missed the answer to this. So my question is, is there a present definition, difference in definition between commercial and industrial? Because I missed it if you said it. And what can be done today and what can we do in the future? So the previous gentleman said, how can we deal with the change? But I want to know today what is possible. And is there a difference between commercial
and industrial. Okay, we'll try to answer that
Thank
for you. David, you want to take a shot at it?
Yes, sir. Pat's pulling up the actual code language, and he can read as well as I. He's closer to the computer, so as soon as he finds it, I'll just turn the microphone
Well, they're defined in commercial, the commercial zone. The uses that are allowed in that zone are contained in Article 2.6 of our Land Use and Development Code. And commercial is, defined as generally anything, any activity done for profit. So it's a very broad definition, but industrial, although it's not specifically defined in our definitions, there are two zones that encompass that, and the descriptions are, light industrial versus industrial. The difference being that light industrial is for manufacturing and processing activities that are of a non-nuisance character, that are manufacturing and wholesale businesses that are clean, quiet, free of noise, odor, dust, and smoke. And industrial encompasses any manufacturing or processing use, including those not permitted in the light industrial zone. And then the specific uses in each of both of those zones are specified in those two articles. So kind of a rambling answer to a fairly simple question, but that's, that's
Go ahead,
how
David.
commercial versus industrial is defined in our code.
Pat, just to piggyback on your thought and help the audience, the other way to think about it is since industrial and light industrial are expressly laid out as these certain things he just mentioned, then it must logically follow that commercial uses are those commercial uses not covered by light industrial or industrial.
Okay. Yes, thank you, David. Any more questions? Janet, yeah, come. We'll go 5 more minutes, and then we'll just continue again at 6 p.m. tonight. Go right ahead.
Janet Torline, same address. I haven't moved since I last spoke. I'm wondering about all the information that regarding ZON 180016. Will that be preserved on the website? Or now that that is defunct, how can we preserve all that testimony and information that has been entered into that process?
David?
Mr. Chairman and audience, it is a public record. We will keep it in our electronic file system. It will always be available to the public.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll take one more and we're done.
My name is Heather Coy. I live at 1018 South Wolf Lodge Creek Road. I have a question. Is the company still planning on using the boat launch as the turnaround site? Do you know that?
David, do you want to
I
respond?
don't know. That's the level of detail that will come out in the special notice.
Special
review.
notice.
But
Okay, it has been discussed in the last meeting, so I just wanted to, it was discussed in detail. My concern is that I've had many, many years boating in that area to observe the massive traffic and congestion in that area. And so I'm a huge fan of industry, putting food on the plates. And I don't know this company's environmental impact. I don't know enough about the company to know that, but I do know that that would put more traffic in an already tight parking lot. I've seen enough to know that it could be pretty dangerous with little kids and dogs and families running back and forth from boats to everything. So my main concern is I don't know if that's going to be considered a site, is there a right given to them to be able to turn around, or do they have to go and file for the right to be able to do that in order, to have
Okay,
a
so
turnaround?
this goes back to the special notice. David?
well, I'm going to turn it over to the project planner on this.
Okay, go right ahead, Vlad.
Good afternoon. For the record, Vlad Finkel.
You're off, Vlad.
Can everybody hear me now? I have had conversation with the BLM representative, and as far as I know, Rand and Mr. Condon are both working with that individual to review the existing special recreational permit to allow for the BLM boat launch parking area to be a turnaround. However, that has to go through their review, and they that agency would be the one to make that decision. We don't make that decision. I don't know what the outcome of that will be, and it's too premature to make that decision at this time.
Can I ask just one more thing again? What, if I wanted to oppose that or something, I would need to go to the BLM then? Is that correct?
I would say so, correct. And I don't know if they filed for that. They currently have a special recreational permit to utilize the boat launch to to load and offload material, but that would need to be modified in order to allow for the turnaround. And I don't know the details of that information. That would be a question to the BLM individual. And I have his contact if you need it.
Oh, I'll take that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, then. So, okay, sir, one more. That's it. Let's go.
Dan Studer, 3730 North Monarch Lane, or North Monarch Drive, Coeur d'Alene. It's kind of directed more towards David here, but you mentioned that the file for 1990 and that decision record, you would need a FOIA to get that information.
It's a public information request. Yeah.
Right, okay. Is it possible to get that information online?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah,
We have everything electronic. That actual resolution, or excuse me, the ordinance I put on the screen, we've already loaded into our file. We can walk you through the telephone so you can download it yourself.
Excellent.
What I think the question earlier that we'll have to do the research on is we don't have all the notes and anything else that might have accompanied that decision. I don't know if it, frankly, something 30 years old exists. I have bumped into occasions where that's been tossed. But we'll go through all of our records to see what's available.
And we'll just call you and get a project number and so that we can access it?
Yes.
Thank you.
The front counter at 446-1070 can walk you through anything.
Okay, then.
Motion.
So I'm going to entertain a motion that we continue. There are no decisions to be made at this time, and so we're going to be continuing the hearing to 6 p.m. this evening because it was noticed as a dual hearing, dual session. Go right ahead.
I move that we recess and continue the hearing until 6 p.m.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks?
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan?
Aye.
Chairman Philios?
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Time is now 3 p.m. This meeting is adjourned. Oh, by the way, did anybody from the last meeting leave a hearing aid?